sure I'm far more awkward than you, and that would be proven true right now. It's also sort of awkward to be looking at this person who's right here. Hi, everybody on Zoom. Good evening. I'm glad to be here with all of you. When Sheila asked me to introduce her before she reads from her essays, of course, I immediately said yes, extremely honored. I also was like, what? Essays? I thought of Sheila exclusively as a poet. And I was pretty embarrassed that I didn't realize, what the breadth of her work consisted of, but I did feel a little bit better after orientation when, we did a show of hands about what genre we were here studying, and Sheila said, poet. Anyway, I set to work reading all of the essays that Sheila had shared with me and a bunch of interviews and other material. And I wrote this intro that was like a combination academic paper / love letter, and it ran about 10 minutes long. And I had excerpts and some analysis and a lot of gushing. And it was very obvious that what I had prepared could not be the intro that I gave today. So I'll try to keep it short. Sheila's poetry has been published in 3 chapbooks and 2 full-length collections, including Beautiful Nerve, published in 2019, which Bustle selected as one of the 14 best debuts of the past 5 years, and Mostly Human, published last year, which was winner of the 2020 Wicked Woman Book Prize. She is co-author with Sandra Faulkner of Writing the Personal, Getting Your Stories Onto the Page. Sheila's essays can be found in print and online journals like River Teeth and The Rumpus, Literary Mama and Brevity, and in Glamour magazine. She's been nominated for Best American Essays, Xanx Best of the Web, and a Pushcart Prize. In 2022, Clash Books will publish her memoir and essays, which is presently entitled. Sheila's essays are about ordinary experiences and all of their beauty, sadness, tenderness, and disappointment. Reading them is like being in the beginnings of a very intimate relationship because she allows herself to be vulnerable on the page and through that reveals herself to her reader. Her essays are about motherhood, divorce, loss, the fear of loss, grief, personal discovery, and her very complicated relationship with the memory of her father. She avoids the sentimental. Instead, her essays are inventive and smart and very carefully crafted. In an interview with David Housley of BrickHouse Books, Sheila said that when she is writing essays or memoir, she strives to plant the seeds of the theme and focus very early on for her reader. As Sheila cultivates the seeds of those themes and her essays grow, blossom, and bear fruit, the reader bears witness to her heart searching, her reflection, and her realizations. And through that, she and the reader are connected. Tonight, Sheila will be reading from her memoir and essays, which she says has been 20 years in the making. When describing the process of writing this, she said it was definitely not what she would call fun writing, but necessary. Doing the hard work and for sharing a piece of you with us tonight. Everybody, please join me in welcoming the director of Chatham's MFA program and my exceptional advisor, Sheila Squillante. Wow, Natalie, thank you. I'm just going to switch my Zoom to pick up the gallery view. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. I just want to start by saying I'm always inspired by the faculty who come to SCW, but this year maybe especially so, because we have with us my dear friend Julia, who some of you know was my thesis advisor when I was an MFA student as a poet at Penn State. We also have Brian Broom, who's sitting in the back of the room, whose book just like sent my brain into space. I don't even know what to say about your book, Brian, but really inspired me because I am working on a memoir right now, and I'm going to read some of it tonight. And who can't be inspired by Disha Filial's work? Talk about outer space, right? And Leslie's work too. The heart in your work, Leslie, is what I think of the most. So I'm really happy to be here, and I'm very honored to get to read among these superstars. So Monica said some really amazing things this afternoon to us, and I've been thinking about them all day, what I was going to pull from, what I would take away from that craft talk. And a couple of things stand out. One, read something that you love. So I'm going to start by reading you one of my favorite things that I've written, and I am reading prose tonight. I also heard her say, think about the order of the things that you read.
So instead of ending us all on kind of a somber note, I'm going to try to pick us up at the end. Okay. And then the other thing that I think I just take generally from all of the writers in this room, and it is the hardest thing to do, is to risk something in my writing and to put myself in a vulnerable position. So I'm going to read a piece from my memoir and essay that has never ever been read before. It's, it's still in progress to all of you, and it is about writing in some ways, and it's about identity. So it's 2 very short pieces on either end and then a longer piece in the middle. So I'll begin with 4 menus. 1, we're eating Korean soup tonight. Yukgaejang, shredded beef with cellophane noodles, scallions, and some long, fibrous, mysterious vegetable, and spice. Mouthfuls of red oil that make my nose run and my tongue sting. I am in love with the man across the table whose nose is running too. We glisten and are happy. Happiness is the long tails of soybeans slicked with sesame oil, the strings hanging from your mouths. We sip soup and poke at condiments with our wooden chopsticks, the kind that snap and splinter, but who cares? I skewer a piece of jellied fish cake, bring it quivering to his lips. Another new, unexpected texture. When we eat together for the first time, it is before knowledge, before the waitress knows our spice preferences, his flaming, mine not meek, but milder. Before she has suggested other menu items, dulsat bibimbap crisping in hot Korean crockware, and even steered us clear of some, codfish soup, bland, no depth, not good. All before we know where our tastes will take us. I am a self-proclaimed gourmet. I have tried everything offered me at least once, but I have never before this first night eaten the Korean pickled cabbage called kimchi. I know nothing of the way its light carbonation will incite, the way its crunch will satisfy. It's a revelation, that first bite. I feel extended. I surpass myself. The whole room ferments. Poetry, kimchi, philosophy. Later, when we sit kissing on my secondhand couch, he will exclaim, I love your eyebrows, and I will touch them and fall. 2, food is love. Samuel Butler said, eating is touch carried to the bitter end. I understand. I was in Paris with friends. We sat in a park where parents played with their children, bundled in colorful wools for the early March chill. They kicked yellow balls, ran laughing after each other, their hoods flapping behind them. I want to eat them, I exclaimed. I am 32 years old and childless. I am childless and in love with a man who's not sure he wants children. Some days I crave. I am a lean witch cackling hungrily into a bone-cold wind. 3. In my 20s, I was voted most succulent among my closest friends. I'm pausing, Monica. Okay. We had just seen a film in which plane crash survivors must resort to cannibalism among the wreckage in the snow. After, it was decided that my ample figure paired with my high energy would make for the tastiest meat. We made a pact. If we ever crash on top of a snow-topped mountain and I die, you have my blessing to eat me. Blessing, an invocation of good fortune. If we crash and I die, I hope they are blessed with the warmth of a fire and time for slow cooking, for dining with relish and reverence, knowing that my spirit hovers, toasting their survival. 4, for some, food is an inconvenience, something that wastes time. No, food extends time, slows it for us generously. I cook because I believe in a slow life, a life of praise. I cook for my friends because I see them as divine. I cook to make holy moments, to call out and reflect. I cook complex recipes in atonement. I gave up religion long ago. Now Sundays are for another kind of supper, one that acknowledges the sacrifices of human relationships. Sundays are for mundane tomato sauce stirred through with thyme and oregano and worship for the sensual world. It's a kind of worship that makes it impossible to ignore the implication of the body, the way food changes us, fills us with our own good, hearty love. Food is worship, and God, to me, is kimchi, Kalamata olives, artichoke hearts, and roasted garlic popped hot from its skin and spread warm with butter on bakery bread. God is lamb shanks, braised long in orange juice and Cabernet, is chopping Spanish onions with a heavy knife, is bittersweet chocolate chunked from dark Swiss bars, is bittersweet entirely. Zoom, is the sound okay for Zoom? Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Thank you. Okay, here comes the vulnerable part. Oh, I actually should tell you, there's a funny story. Oh, my husband is on the Zoom. Great, Paul, I'm going to tell the story, all right? That essay I just read to you got me in a lot of trouble with my husband when I first read it out loud when we were first dating. I read that piece to a crowd in State College, Julia, at like Summer Art Fest, whatever that was called, right? And you know, I read this piece about this man who I love who doesn't think he wants children, and afterwards he was so mad at me, and he was like, "Why?" And he disappeared for like 3 days, like wouldn't answer the phone, and I was devastated and desperate. And why wouldn't you talk to me? And he said, "Why would you say that in front of all those people? We never talked about that." I was like, "You mean you want children with me?" Anyway, it all worked out. They're 15 and 13 now. He didn't leave. He didn't leave me. Oh, I love you. Okay. All right. This piece is a chapter from somewhere in my in a memoir that I've been working on right now. It's this is not the book that that Natalie mentioned. I have a collection of memoir essays that is separate from this. This is a different book that I've been working on that traces my development as a feminist, coming to it a little bit later than many do. And it's set up against the backdrop of my pretty like horrendously bad first marriage to my high school boyfriend. Do not recommend. Okay, the difference between fiction and nonfiction. Fiction was the name of the first graduate class I enrolled in at Southern Connecticut State University in 1995. Fiction workshop. Nonfiction is what I wrote the whole time I was in it. It's also what I wrote in fiction workshops during my undergraduate years. The short story about the young Catholic girl who lies so she can go to confession with a handsome priest. The one about the father who dies too young and the daughter who leaves behind. Fiction, sure. I didn't know then that I would be a nonfiction writer one day. I thought nonfiction meant journalism or textbooks. So I kept producing characters who were really me, doing things that were vaguely cloaked, just enough to create plausible deniability. Nope, not me. I wrote a character who loved to feel the satin edge of the blanket, for instance, how she loved the cool softness against her cheek and lips, but also how she could fold the satin on itself to create a sharpness that was equally delightful, if not more so. Rubbing the satin sounds like a euphemism for masturbation, and this character thought it was better than sex, better even sometimes than orgasm, longer too. When I turned the story into workshop, I got surprising feedback that had nothing to do with craft on my draft from Jeff. "I've never known anyone else who did this," his note exclaimed. "I like to catch the edge of it with my hangnail." I blushed reading it. I felt like I had been caught with my hands between my thighs. I was recognized, this understanding, this intimacy, and suddenly there he was. There was Jeff, entering my life at both the exact wrong and the exact right time. Early on, I drove back to Naugatuck as soon as class got out around 9 p.m. I felt nervous about getting home, worried that my husband, Mike, would be angry that I stayed out too long. I declined invites from classmates to join them after workshop at a local bar. Oh, maybe another time, I'd say. I have a long drive home and early work. It wasn't a lie, but neither was it the entire truth. As the semester went on, I started to realize that I could shape my story with them. They had never met Mike, had no idea who I was with, or more importantly, without him. Years later, in another graduate writing program, where I met Julia, by the way, when I began to learn the craft of creative nonfiction from memoirist Vivian Gornick, I would understand that choosing and shaping persona was an elemental part of telling one's story. In that first workshop class at Southern, shaping persona was also an elemental part of experiencing my actual life. Which Sheila would I be that day? Terrified Sheila with imposter syndrome and a crumbling marriage didn't have to make an appearance at all if I didn't want her to. I could be anyone. 25 years of filled journals or a fresh blank page. At first, I would have called it lying. Later, I would think of it as performing, preferring to compartmentalize this new precious part of my life from the utter wreckage at home. Jeff's black hair sprung in tight curls from his head, messy, but not too messy. They gleamed like the leather of his black motorcycle jacket that snugged his small frame. He had a great ass. He sat across from me in workshop next to Wayne, an auto mechanic taking only his second workshop ever. They both wrote blue-collar stories about guys they knew in real life, mechanics and machinists and lathe operators. They read and revered Raymond Carver, the quiet terseness cloaking all that hard emotion. Wayne turned out to be some kind of prodigy. A few years later, he would get a coveted full ride to the Iowa workshop, and his first published short story would come about when his professor, hot off the workshop, rang up famous writer who was guest editing top-tier lit mag and read his draft to her over the phone. It was hard to hate Wayne, though. He was humble and sweet. He seemed as shocked by his talent as we were. In our own workshop, the professor's sole comment as we discussed his short story was a stunned, "It's amazing." I don't remember Jeff's early drafts, but later he would write a story where the main character climbs a water tower over a small town with a woman he might love. He points out constellations to her, Orion and Cassiopeia. He asks her if she knows the myth of Cassiopeia and goes on to explain that she, quote, acted like a bitch or something, so she got tied to the throne upside down. Then the characters pull stars over them like a blanket, all subtext and oversimplification, which would be part of the constant problem between us once we started sleeping together, once we fell into what passed for love. The first time I kissed Jeff, I was still married. We were at the Cape Codder bar after class. Wayne and Tim and maybe Susan were there too. It was one of the first times I went out with workshop friends, and I always drove the short distance from campus to the bar by myself. I needed those couple of minutes to breathe and talk myself out of bailing, of taking the right onto Whitney Ave and heading straight home. I'd have to psych myself into turning left and then right into the shabby parking lot behind the bank where we parked and hoped not to get ticketed. These were the nights I felt absolutely terrified and terrifyingly free. Everyone was there when I arrived. I scooched into the bench with my back up against the outside wall and window right across from Jeff. "Let's get a couple of pictures," somebody probably said, and heading for the long bar that ran for the width of the dark, shabby room. I missed something there. This was before it was illegal to smoke in Connecticut bars, so everything had that faintly jaundiced patina from years of nicotine kissing the walls and floors. A deer head with a full rack of antlers hung on the wall over the jukebox. I remember it with a cigarette stuck in one of its hooves. "That's a pretty ring," Jeff said. He reached over the Formica table and fingered the moonstone cabochon on my right hand. "What kind of stone is it?" "Moonstone, I think. My friend gave it to me." "I thought it might be opal," he said, "the way it changes color when it moves." Now he was holding my hand, moving it back and forth in his palm, staring down at the jewelry on my right hand, which, together with the fact of my diamond wedding rings on my left hand, made me feel like I was either going to burst into flames or else faint. Opal's my birthstone, I said. You can't wear them in the cold. They're too fragile. I pulled my hands back and stuck them in my lap until the beer arrived. Then I was happy to have a plastic cup filled with Rolling Rock to wrap them around. I could tell Jeff was flirting with me. And though there was part of me that cautioned against it, I didn't say no when someone topped off my beer again. I knew that the more I had to drink, the less nervous his hands would make me. We ended up in the front seat of his silver Camaro, those sure hands unfastening the mother of pearl buttons on my pink cardigan sweater. You know I'm married, I said, as his fingers found my nipples. I saw the ring. He kept kissing me. He didn't seem to mind, and I felt caught in a whirl of pleasure and excitement, tinged with not a small amount of fuck you. Fuck you for checking out of this marriage. Fuck you for whatever is going on with that girl from work. Fuck you for pretending it's nothing, for acting like I can't see it. I kissed Jeff back that night and felt fantastically whole and full. I felt sexy and strong for the first time in God, how many months. I let him have my skin, which he would always say was soft, and I took his hair and wrapped it around and through my fingers, passed it like satin ribbon over my lips. He smelled like clean laundry. I breathed him in. I had to pee. I'd pulled myself away from Jeff and left the Camaro before things got too serious and was driving north on Route 63 when I couldn't take the pressure building in my bladder any longer. I hadn't wanted to go back inside the Cotter to use the restroom because I was afraid I'd run into Tim or Wayne or someone and they'd be able to read extramarital lust all over my face. I was still figuring out how much I could tell these new friends, how much I could trust them. Meanwhile, I argued with myself. I need to pee. You should have gone before we left. I know, but I didn't know how bad I had to go then. Well, now what? I really need to pee. Okay, you know what you have to do then. Oh, that? Oh no, I could never. Fine, then pee your pants. No, then pull over. It's time you got over this. Jesus Christ, Sheila, what's the matter with you? Literally everyone has peed outside at some point or another. Not me. Okay, fine, I'll do it. It took me a mile or two to convince myself, but in the end, I had no choice after all. I was definitely about to die from needing to relieve myself of Rolling Rock overflow. So I pulled off the road where I thought it looked safe enough, walked behind the car, yanked down my jeans and squatted, praying I wouldn't spray all over myself in the process. It was a warm night, and my skin still rang from having Jeff's hands all over it. I let a small amount of urine trickle out and felt oddly aroused, but it wasn't a sexual arousal. Instead, it felt like my whole self was shivering awake. It felt thrilling. I was peeing outside, on the side of the road, behind a car, in public, after a beautiful man had found me attractive enough to unbutton my sweater and get an erection. I felt powerful, ridiculous, and relieved. Hey, moon, I yelled at the moon. Look at me, I'm peeing outside. The moon did not respond, so I drove myself the rest of the way home. One Wednesday a month, I went to folio readings at the coffee shop on Whaley Avenue. Folio was the name of the student literary magazine put out by Southern. Early in the semester, Tim had invited me to be a featured reader. It was one of the first times I'd read since graduating with my BA from Manhattanville College, and I felt nervous and excited. My first poetry reading ever had been during Women's History Month when I was a junior. I didn't read my own poems, but instead work by my favorites, Anne Sexton and Sylvia Plath. I remember the dark wood of the lectern and the small brass reading lamp that curved above the poem Lady Lazarus. I had typed using my desktop word processor, those things, onto a clean sheet of paper. Beware, beware, out of the ash I rise with my red hair and I eat men like air. It's hard to explain how it felt to speak those words in my own voice, amplified into a microphone and tinny sound system, how it felt to hear it bounce off the ornate wood walls and the tops of the heads of the people there to listen to poetry by empowered women. What did they expect? Did they expect Plath? Did they expect me? I sure didn't expect the voice that came out of me that night. Even without the microphone, I could tell it was round and sure and imbued with just enough dramatic effect. Beware. I loved being in front of an audience. I instantly knew I was good at it. The next time I stood at the wooden lectern, I was reading my own poems about difficult relationships with my parents, where I, quote, curled on my bed like a sick snail, which only now do I realize owes a debt of resemblance to Plath's own line, I rocked shut as a seashell. And I imagined a speaker who dreams of eating babies. That's the second baby eating reference tonight. I just realized that. Ooh. Okay. I just lost my place. I think it was supposed to be a pro-choice poem. Maybe I'm being too generous with my past self. I had never considered myself a political poet, and I've always had a bit of a ghoulish temperament. But I remember this poem shocked people good. Greg, my best friend, the man I desperately wished would profess his love for me and somehow magically spirit me away to another realm with him, begged me not to read it in front of professors. Sheila, please, it's really dark. It's just a poem, I said. It's not real. All poems are real, he said. I'm just saying there might be children there. Okay, I won't read it, I lied, and then read it anyway. He was right, of course. It was way too dark, and not in any interesting, sophisticated way either. Eating babies was nothing like eating men like air. I was not Sylvia Plath. I mean, thank God. Who remembers what I read on those Wednesday nights in New Haven? The work was not the point. The point was to anticipate the newness, the feelings of terror and elation I'd have as I got ready for the drive. As I walked into the place by myself and grabbed a table, I was always at least a half hour early because I needed to have the security of a table in front of me. The idea of standing or sitting on a random milk crate was enough to make me want to vomit. I could push past the nerves as long as I had a safe space. People liked my poems. They introduced themselves to me and gushed over them. I loved the sound of my voice first, and then I loved the sound of their voices praising me. This is also how I came to meet Corinne. Corinne with the short blonde hair and the lightest blue eyes. Corinne with a tiny waist and incredible cleavage. Corinne who I caught myself staring at during a reading and who stared right back. Corinne who grabbed my hand one night at the bar and said, I'm going to kiss you, let's go. I followed her into the bathroom where she pinned me against the inside of the stall and kissed me with ferocity that tasted like whiskey and cigarette smoke. Delicious Corinne with her delicious hips, who kissed me again in front of everyone in that bar, and I let her because I was becoming myself now. I had been imagining Corinne for years and didn't know how to ask for her, or where to find her. In February of 1996, I wrote in my journal, I want to write about a young married woman who finds herself becoming attracted to women, or finds herself attracted to and distracted by the idea of being with a woman. This is also a quote. This woman is still interested in men, her husband. That's not the issue. In fact, in her personal life, she finds that men understand her better than women, and hence seeks out men more often than women for intimate relationships. All of her life, this has been the case. This goes on for 3 pages, all in the third person, as if I was writing a character sketch. But it is so clearly and obviously about me, and then more. I want to write about this woman, but I just don't know how or where to start. I understand her struggles and that she feels alone in them. She has no confidant. I must have imagined it would be enough just to write about her, that I would state the actual desires I was feeling in my skin, but didn't know how to talk about. It's so obvious now, looking back at it, that I was writing in a code, trying to hide myself from myself. I had always done this in my journals, written just to the edge of honesty and then stopped. At every age, from 14 to 20-something, a pattern of obfuscation in language maps my inability to be honest with even my most private self. Each entry would begin with an honest attempt. Something like, everything is so confusing. My parents are not telling me something. I can sense it. Too hard, too much, exhaustion, more later, ... Or, is this what I wanted? Why did I think my life would change when we got married? I'm so tired, ... Always an ellipsis following an attempt to uncover or discover. The declaration of exhaustion just before. I couldn't get there, even when I knew I was the only one reading. In memoir writing, we learn about truth with a small t and truth with a capital T. For years, I had been unable to honestly extricate myself from a relationship with Mike that I clearly was not happy in, did not want to be in. I could not simply say, I no longer want to be here. So I sabotaged myself by cheating. This is small t truth, the truth of fact. It's true that I cheated on Mike many times in our relationship, which began when I was 16 and was obviously ending here at 26. But it's also true that he abused me in myriad ways, emotionally, verbally, physically. Fact, fact, fact. And those facts contribute to the large T, the emotional truth, the truth of our existence as people in a relationship that should have ended when we were teenagers. My dalliances, and later his, and later mine, shined the harshest possible light onto what we knew about ourselves, but weren't able to admit. We were never supposed to be married. We were stunted people who had not allowed ourselves to grow and become. On March 29th, 1996, I wrote in my journal, "This is the first time in my life that I can see myself the way I want to be." Corinne would be the first, but not the last woman in my life, in my bed. And on 9/25/96, 2-year wedding anniversary, an anniversary of mistake or disaster. I have knots inside, rocks breaking against each other, a torrent of nausea. I spend the day ignoring, avoiding, drinking too much coffee. I'm barely here. Folio reading, dragged myself there out of obligation, but it's Wednesday night and I know the house will be empty when I return. The honesty thing. I was getting better at it. Thanks. Would you mind one more short one? Is that okay? All right. There's a lot of overlap. Some of the characters you'll recognize maybe. Okay. Say my name. For 3 years in my late 20s, after my divorce, I dated a man who almost never said my name. And it wasn't as if he was simply swapping my given name for a series of affectionate nicknames. I wasn't Sweetie or Pookums, and Bay wasn't even a thing. I was simply the recipient of his speech or a pronominal referent. I was you or she or even hey, but never Sheila. I'm not sure at what point in our obviously quite doomed relationship I realized it, but once I did, I listened for it constantly. I began to obsess about it, telling my friends he never says my name. It wasn't his only withholding, to be sure, but it hurt me in a deep, primal way. More than wanting him to suddenly become publicly affectionate or to book his plane ticket for a long weekend with me on his own without my prodding for once, I wanted him to say my name. I have, it seems, a pretty uncommon name for someone my age. I'm 50. I was never in school with another Sheila, have never taught one, and in my whole life, the only other Sheilas I've met, with the exception of last year when I heard a little girl, like a 3-year-old, that was weird, were either my aunt, after whom I was named, or women of her generation, 20 years older. Sheila is not a classic American name. It was on trend. It was a trend in the 1950s and only ever reached number 62 on those baby name charts expecting parents often consult. I've always liked that. I like being a little unusual. I like my name. Feels good to hear it spoken, and even better to hear it sung. The withholding boyfriend was a singer. He wrote and performed his songs out at dive bars in Connecticut shoreline towns in the 90s when we were together. I don't have to tell you that he never sung my name either. But others have. Not lovers, but musicians, real ones with real songs on actual records, promoted and distributed by official record labels, not Black Crowes knockoffs recorded onto cassettes with crooked handmade labels, sitting in a pile on the bar after the gig, next to a sweating pitcher of Rolling Rock. Check out our new release, only $5. Proceeds go to steam cleaning the cat pee out of George's basement carpet so we can practice down there again. Tommy Rowe sang my name in 1962. He sang about my blue eyes and a ponytail and about how he went for a ride and he felt funny inside. Was he ill? Had he had too much ice cream? I always mix this song up with the other one where the guy sings about the girl in the itsy bitsy teeny weeny yellow polka dot bikini, maybe because both songs were on the radio around my house when I was a kid, and my mom used to sing them both to me. Mom definitely sang my name and said it all the time. Moms are good like that, even when they're mixing your name up with your sister's, 50-50. Sean Cassidy, who was a dreamy hunk of a singer when I was a child, Sean Cassidy sang my name in 1978 on the single Taxi Dance from his album Under Wraps, the cover of which featured the Tiger Beat heartthrob pushing his hands against some invisible, flexible barrier between us, trying, obviously, and to no avail, to hold me. This was the first time I encountered my name in a song all by myself when I wasn't listening for it, and it was shocking, thrilling. Imagine me, if you will, lying on the blue shag carpet of my bedroom, headphones like vinyl grapefruit halves against my ears, when the first line of the song bleeps through. Sheila was a girl misunderstood. Yes, I am 8 years old and misunderstood. Oh, Sean, you get me. Ready for the World sang my name. In 1985, my name was actually kind of part of pop culture for a little while, since I shared it with the musician Sheila E., who spent the 1980s showing Prince, who was actually my boyfriend at the time, what was fabulous, what on the drums. And then suddenly there were these other guys who sounded so much like a certain sexy purple someone that nobody could believe it wasn't him singing. Oh, oh, Sheila, let me love you till the morning comes. And though the band claimed the song wasn't about the badass Sheila drummer, nobody believed that either. The Smiths sang my name. In 1987, the most important Sheila song ever uttered was penned by Morrissey, whose lyrics, quoted as flirtation inside of a Match.com profile, would lead me 15 years later to the man I would marry and make babies with. Hi, Paul. But that's not the reason it gets top billing. Just listen to these lyrics, Sheila. Is it wrong to want to live on your own? No, it's not wrong, but I must know. How can someone so young sing words so sad? Morrissey is really listening to you. This song is a conversation, not a mere description of your cuteness or a lament that you're not performing adequately in the fawning girlfriend department. And he's noticed that you aren't yourself these days. Sheila, take a bow, boot the grime of this world in the crotch, dear. It's a call to action, a battle cry, a rebel yell. It's a veritable Sheila revolution. You don't have to wait around for this joker or that one either, Sheila. Thanks to the internet, you can go out and find someone much, much better whose name is Paul Bilger. Take my hand and off we stride. Oh, la, 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 la. You're a girl and I'm a boy. La, 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 la. Take my hand and off we stride. La, 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 la. I'm a girl and you're a boy. And hey, while you're at it, screw gender roles. Hell, screw gender entirely. Find yourself a dude or a lady or a dude lady or a lady dude who wants to stride off with you. Good verb, stride. That's some serious forward motion there, Sheila. And that's exactly what you're going to need in 15 years after one practice marriage and one doomed from the start dalliance with a macho, laconic, emotionally withholding dude with fantastic hair and a great ass, whose band would never have covered a Smith song. Morphine sang my name. In 1993, they sang the ridiculous and prescient lines, which I cannot sing. Sheila has a cat. She pets the cat, puts a spell on the cat, a beautiful cat. I did have a beautiful cat. I have 3, in fact. But one of them, a smart, neurotic, gray old lady, is particularly given to following me around, climbing on me everywhere, climbing on my everything, everywhere, all the time. She is the only one of the 3 that has always recognized her name. She has always come running. I play the song for my son. He hears it and his eyes fly open. He laughs. Mommy, you put a spell on Iris? Yes, child, I did. I am just exactly that powerful. It's all in the name. Thank you.
Hello. First, I practiced this out loud. Second, thank you, Sheila, one, for that wonderful reading and for giving me the opportunity to do this. Because third, Monica Prince is the kind of writer who makes me want to plagiarize. Because all her work just has me saying, why didn't I think of that? Prince explores and excavates not only the stories of people, but also of language, which is my thing. In pieces such as Temporary and Patience is a Virtue, she interrogates each dictionary entry of these words and weaves emotion, narrative, heart through them. As I was working on this introduction, a Hindi song kept running through my head, which I'm not going to sing, but it roughly translates to, in no language are there words for me to describe who you are. These two are just compliments and cannot express the truth. Nothing I say here can do justice to the brilliance of Monica Prince. But if we sat around bemoaning the lack of the perfect permutation of words, none of us would ever get anything done. So the homepage of Monica Prince's website announces her as writer, teacher, queen of excellence. In an interview with The Rumpus, Prince said, poetry should shock and surprise and comfort and distress and empower and embolden and soften us. That's the kind of poetry I want in the world. That's the kind of poetry that she creates through her choreo poems. A choreo poem is, and I quote, a choreographed series of poems that blends performance poetry, dance, music, art, and other forms of performance media together on stage. This is also my shit. Think a dance recital, choir concert, art exhibit, poetry slam, and parkour video presented as a play. Prince's latest work, How to Exterminate the Black Woman, published by Pact Books last year, illuminates the struggle of the Black woman trying to thrive in a society seeking to consume and erase her. Her first full-length poetry collection, Instructions for Temporary Survival, won the 2018 Discovery Award by Red Mountain Press. She is the managing editor of the Santa Fe Writers Project Quarterly and the co-author of the suffrage play Pageant of Agitating Women with Anna Andes. Her work appears or is forthcoming in the Texas Review, Madcap Review, American Poetry Journal, and elsewhere. Monica Prince, as we heard earlier today, is a professor of activist and performance writing at Susquehanna University in Pennsylvania. Her teaching philosophy confirms her status as Queen of Excellence. It says, let's move mountains and blast walls and light fires because the world is broken. And if you're taking my class, which I would really like to do, by the way, you're looking for a toolbox and some super glue. Similar to how the harmonious orbits of the stars and planets were thought to create the music of the spheres, Prince's performances create a music of meaning with craft that balances not only various forms of art, but also various experiences of being human, being alive, and the many systems, both natural and constructed, that affect this existence. I look forward to the music and magic she will share with us today. Please join me in welcoming Monica Prince.
Okay, I get it, Geisha. I get why you cry. Who are these people?
these people. These, oh, okay, give me a second. Good grief, y'all are fabulous. Okay, that was wonderful, and thank you. Thank you for that was great. That was such a good, no one's ever said they wanted to plagiarize me. That's such a nice compliment. I love that. Hello, Zoom. Hi, hi, hi. It's lovely to see you all. I'm so glad. Okay, so thank you for noting poems. I'm going to read both those poems tonight. So I'm going to read 6 pieces for you. And as I said before, you got to kind of do some stuff during my poems. So I tell people also to read what they're preoccupied with. I did not say that today, but it's something I encourage people to do. So what I'm currently preoccupied with are about 4 things. I really, really, really love etymology. So like where words come from and why we read them and why they mean what they mean. I also adore form poems. So poems that use particular forms like the sestina. So if you've ever read How to Exterminate the Black Woman, which is my Korea poem, there's 6 sestinas in there. What else was the third thing? Third thing is I just moved in with my partner. So, you know, I love him very much and he's been in the back taking a lot of photos. But he's also something I'm super preoccupied with, shock. And the 4th thing is I am really, really obsessed with the concept of pleasure because I don't know if anyone was around for the last 5 years. You know, how things kind of sucked for a lot of everything. So I decided after How to Exterminate the Black Woman that I was going to write about joy because I deserve joy and you deserve joy. So let's write some joy. So I'm really preoccupied with pleasure and how it shows up in sex, how it shows up in relationships, how it shows up in polyamory. So those are the 4 things I'm obsessed with. And I'm going to read you pieces of all of that. So I'm reading you 6 poems. It's a nice round number. And the first one is Patience is a Virtue, which I wrote for Tamika Palmer, which is Breonna Taylor's mother. And it starts with an epigraph from the Associated Press journalist named Dylan Loven. And the article is titled, Louisville will pay $12 million in lawsuit settlement in Breonna Taylor's death, posted in the Denver Post, September 15th, 2020. And the epigraph states, Palmer has said she is trying to be patient about the results of Cameron's criminal investigation and the long wait, which is now 6 months since her daughter's death. Been almost a year, in case we're wondering. Patience, noun, circa 1200. Patience, meaning quality of being willing to bear adversities, calm endurance of misfortune, suffering, etc. As in, Tamika Palmer has exhibited patience while the city of Louisville investigates the murder of her 26-year-old daughter, Breonna Taylor. From Old French, patience, meaning patience, sufferance, permission, and directly from Latin, patientia, the quality of suffering or enduring, suffering. As in, the cops who entered Breonna Taylor's home on a no-knock warrant lacked patience. Also, indulgence, leniency, humility, submissiveness, submission to lust. As in, Breonna Taylor's home was only targeted because she used to love a man who probably listed her address as his, believing in her patience with him as he failed to get his shit together since he wasn't there when the cops arrived, but her current boyfriend was. Literally, quality of suffering. As in, one must practice patience when trying to fall asleep to avoid further anxiety about never waking up. But Breonna Taylor was sleeping when the cops broke in and shot into her home, killing her as she shifted from REM to consciousness. From Ambrose Bierce's Devil's Dictionary in 1911, a minor form of despair disguised as a virtue. As in, not exhibiting violent behavior in response to the murder of your daughter is a sign of patience, virtuous even in a Black woman like Tamika Palmer, as in $12 million won't fill the holes in Breonna Taylor. Read, entrance and exit wounds caused by ammunition ejected from police issued guns resulting in death, or fill the hole in her mother's heart. But given time, read, enough displayed patience. Police reform promised by the same city of Louisville that murdered her daughter might make it so Tamika Palmer or every other parent of a child sacrificed, so white people have something tangible to get mad about, and everyone else can keep living as permanent ghosts grieving. So Tamika Palmer never has to indulge in patience again. So, thinking about pleasure, something that makes me very happy is being childless, which is like kind of rude to say. But you know, I don't know how else to say that in a way that's like not rude, whatever. So the last year, one of the ways, but like also if I want to be childless, that means you have to be responsible, right? So you have to have people practice safe sex and stuff. So last year on election day, I foolishly got an IUD. It wasn't supposed to be on election day. Life is rude that way. So I'm not gonna read you that poem, which is 3 pages of ranting. I'm gonna read you a different poem that's kind of in response to that experience. So this is called, I'm gonna read you 2 poems and they connect, they speak to each other. First is called The Poem for My Uterus's Depression. It's from my perspective, that's important because there's another, anyway, okay. She wants a baby, but she doesn't know what she's asking. Unable to hear my plea for reason over the roar of ovaries missile launching eggs for her, unaware of the moon or the calendar due to hormones, poor sleep and improper hydration, she paints the nursery, buys pillows, sends me to the store for salt, sugar, antioxidants. I want to say every month I disappoint her and she throws a temper tantrum. But the logic implies a consistent schedule she hasn't followed since I stopped taking pink and white pills. At this point, when there's a break in the noise of ovum shelling or biological clock ticking, she'll overhear me say, I don't want children. We'll pick out the words sterilization or tenure or trap. She gets her violent outbursts from me, prone to not just cry and scream, but to plant C4 in her own walls and detonate. Believing I'll listen this time, change this time, do better this time. During 6 months of accidental abstinence, she was more understanding. Simply took down the wallpaper and recycled the stuffed animals instead of burning it all to the ground. At first sight of semen, our silence broke. And when she wasn't rewarded with a baby, or rather, when she tried to kidnap the sperm, hold them hostage. Thank you for thinking I'm funny. Or rather, when she tried to kidnap the sperm, hold them hostage until the eggs could properly vet and approve their pairing and attachment, she stopped breathing for 40 days. I hemorrhaged slowly, wiping away her hard work, waking up in pools of homemade blankets, mobiles, lyrics to new lullabies, all red and brown and sticky. She stopped answering my calls. My letters returned unopened. She wants a baby. She doesn't know what she's asking. The morning I planted a plastic cross where the crib should be, she thought it was a grave marker, flooding her with memories of each failure flushed down the toilet, every card swipe and pill, turning her room into a radioactive pit. The one almost union with fingernails, who suddenly asphyxiated on the curtains she'd chosen, then vomited himself inside out until she couldn't stand the stench anymore and had to bury the whole thing under dirt and progesterone. If I had asked her permission first, before calling for the cross's construction, I don't believe she would have given me her blessing. I'm used to begging forgiveness anyway. This morning, I wake to the familiar slick of thighs, pennies on my fingertips as I pull them back to confirm. In the blacked out morning, my contacts soaking in saline 15 feet away, my beloved still snoring. I don't waste energy on panic or concern. I don't even lift the white sheets and duvet or squeeze my legs to prevent further catastrophe. I simply roll onto my back, place my hands on top of her, close my eyes. No baby right now, my darling, not now. I honor your frustration. I will not take that from you. All right, so then of course, I taught an erotic writing workshop this past spring. When I do it again, you're all invited, it's super fun. And something I talked about was about your work hurting your own feelings. So this is a poem that may hurt my own feelings, but I'm gonna read it anyway because risk, yeah? All right. So this is called My Uterus Responds to My Allegation That She's Depressed. Obviously, this is from the uterus's perspective. She's a little mean. All right, here we go. You're wrong. It's not about wanting a baby. I want rest. Blame the hormones, their insistence on decoration, contractions, constant revive and retry month after month. I'm tired. You say, I want a baby, but I want peace. An excuse for the fanfare, emptiness. I want clean walls, no more interrogations of sperm, ova weeping in the corners, steady trickles of wasted nutrients flushed out daily. You act like it's my fault. The blood, the aftershocks, the tremble radiating with liquid caution toward hips, thighs, lower back. Blame me because it's easier to pass off responsibility on the organs you praise for keeping you alive, even as you withhold water, sleep, vegetables. Call me emotional, dramatic, as I seize in response to gin-soaked twilight and experiments with mortality. Please, deem my vibration tantrum, my excoriation of old love panic attack. Resist the label crazy for its links to hysteria. Even you aren't stupid enough to speak surgery as a threat so close to my mouth. Honestly, I don't care. The ovaries won't explode if you hold a newborn for too long. I won't collapse at the sight of unsheathed cock dribbling pre-cum. Give us all more credit. Give yourself more grace. I don't want a baby any more than you do. I just want to sleep soundly. Stop playing defense every time the brain interprets danger. You don't know why your skin is drying out, your hair breaks more easily, headaches advance without warning before the day even officially clocks in. Really? You can't figure out why your nails keep splitting and dizzy spells accost you as you walk up the stairs? Seriously? Don't call me beloved when you ignore my signals. I need you to stop saying this pain, this plague humming in your bones is all about grief. The loss of reckless abandon for the hard reality of decision-making. Look, we're an adult now. Long past the infancy of ignorance, drenched in unrepentant knowns. I only want what you want, can only persuade you so much to become more than one. The rest is yours. I am yours. When you taste pennies, I'm simply asking for attention. A little acknowledgement for the ways I've kept you safe. I only follow orders, your orders. Feign shock all you want. These tremors, these quivers, these unrelenting aches will cease. Just tell me what to do. Anyone who subscribes to the notion of passivity when it comes to the body hasn't been inside theirs for very long. I'm saying you're wrong. This is not about a baby. It's about you abandoning me for stress and ambition, believing I can take care of both of us alone. You're wrong. We don't need a baby. We need a reunion. We need your hands above me, promising rest, promising water, promising better, better, better. Trying not to fly into the side. Stay centered. Okay. This is called Temporary. This is another etymology poem. It was inspired. So during last semester, I challenged my students to write a poem for every day of the semester, which is 103 poems. It wasn't required, they didn't have to do it. Only like 6 students actually finished. But the idea was if we have enough students participating in this challenge, enough people, period, participating in this challenge, that we can maybe flood the world with a couple thousand poems in the next couple of months. And that was the goal. So this poem, I was behind, noticeably, and I was just cranking out poems. I was at my partner's house, he was at work, and I was just like, I'm just gonna write all the poems and it's gonna be fine. And like, you know, obviously we cheat. We had haiku, Shoreline. This one's gonna be a 1-line poem, right? Whatever. And so I decided I was going to do etymology of the word temporary because I was listening to music and the Kirk Franklin song popped up, Keep Your Head. And in the bridge, I think it's the bridge that goes to the chorus, the line says, have a faith that can say to a storm, you're temporary. And I was like, I've always loved that line. I'm going to write a poem. So that's this poem, and it's called Temporary. Temporary, as in lasting only for a time, especially seasonal, as in 4 months out of every year, depending on your proximity to the equator or either pole. Related to temporal, meaning worldly, secular, as in one day we'll all be dead because life is only temporary. As in of this earth and not part of heaven, meaning God made the world so we could choose to return to God once this plane of existence, read temporal plane, evaporates. For example, if we cut down every tree and level every mountain and refuse to wash our hands, the last bit of clean water left, our future will be temporary on this temporal planet. Related to tempest, meaning violent storm occurring during a particular season, read temporal experience, as in The Tempest by William Shakespeare, circa 1610, 1611, wherein a lonely sorcerer cajoles his slave, Sprite, to conjure a tempest, read temporary violent storm, to enact revenge and reunite with his daughter, Miranda, after whom a Shakespeare scholar named her only daughter, which is to say, she considered that girl a rescue from a tempest, which is to say, the baby always survives the storm, however violent. With scars, but at least she'll have her life and her name. As in a period of bad weather, read temporary storm, as in seasonal, during which many will die, read transition from this temporal sphere, or suffer injury, as in experience temporary internal or external damage, and may require assistance. An EMT is a temporary savior before reaching the hospital. ICU stays are always temporal, even if you die there, see above. Root of tempestuous, adjective, meaning stormy or turbulent, referred to as rough air in flight safety pamphlets to decrease anxiety caused by the word turbulence, or characterized by violent emotions or behavior, such as initiating a tempest to usurp a king, such as withholding medical care for a Black trans woman because she's trans after she's been harmed during a tempest, such as the phrases, I don't see color, or hate speech isn't tempestuous because words cannot slice open wrists. Read literally, see chain of events, or domino effect, or Mackenzie Adams, or Gabrielle Tay, or Tyler Clementi. From Proto-Indo-European root 10, meaning to stretch, as in stand on a bridge and look down without jumping, as in place your hands flat on the floor and pull your hips to the sky, trying to press your heels down. See, downward facing dog pose, IAST, Adho Mukha Savasana. that has a Sanskrit translation, which I'm not going to try to say, part of Surya Namaskar, the salute to the sun salutation, an inversion asana in modern yoga, also known as glorified stretching, if not used as part of meditation or spiritual practice, as in further than before, as in leaving your comfort zone, but not endangering your life, as in warming your muscles after a period of stagnation, read a temporal stationary position. Also, with derivatives meaning something stretched, thin, as in patience, a temporal practice of waiting, or tensile, the limited temporary capability of being stretched or held, or tension, nervous strain, a stretched condition, often temporary, able to be cut with a knife. With evidence from Sanskrit tantrum, meaning loom, where threads are stretched and weaved to make clothing and blankets which provide temporary cover, or tanoti, meaning lasts, as in forever, but more likely for a limited moment, all related to time, which might be finite in terms of lifetime. Employment, see retirement or termination or furlough. Also see temp agency. Difficulty, see pandemic, loan repayment plans, lease, contractions related to birth, contractions related to grammar, etc. Getting out of bed, also depression hitting snooze. Or love, not related to polyamory, philia, storge, philautia, or agape. Instead, see mania, ludos, eros, or pragma. Serving as a reminder that all storms run out of rain. See Dr. Maya Angelou quoting Gary Allen. And you must practice faith. Read Trust Based on the Evidence Collected Over All These Years. Even your own stunning cells know how to heal, renew, regenerate. They simply cannot help themselves despite illness and bullet and poisoning weekday in and out. They rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat, all to keep you alive. Faith, at the root of which is trust, meaning help arrive soon enough, never too late, welcome for as long as possible, even if it's temporary. So as I stated before, one of my preoccupations is my partner. And here's how you know that like it's a preoccupation and why what I'm about to read is funny, because so he has a name, but I say my partner so often that like no one ever knows his name. His name is Robert, he's great. And so it occurred to me recently while I was working in this particular form, which I'm very quickly gonna explain, that I never put his name in poems. He's just named lover or beloved or partner or mostly those. And it occurred to me that I never say his name. And I was like, that seems kind of problematic. Is it problematic? I don't really know. So I decided to write a lipogram about it. So a lipogram is a type of Eulipian constraint. And a Eulipian constraint is, you know, this complicated types of form created by some French and American people in like the 1950s, which basically states that shouldn't math make literature harder? So these mathematicians and writers were like, let's make literature more difficult by adding numbers to it. So what they decided to do is they create these different challenges for poems. So one of the more famous ones is the lipogram, which is where you write an entire piece without using a particular letter. So the example is, I can't remember the name of the person who wrote it, but like they wrote a whole book without the letter E, and then managed to translate it from French to English, also without the letter E. It's a wild ride. Anyway, so there are other forms of it, but my favorite one is the lipogram, which is when you remove a letter. So what I do for the lipogram is that I choose a word that I like. In this case, it's Robert. And for as many letters are in the word is how many stanzas are in the poem. So Robert has 7 letters. So there are 7 stanzas in this poem. And what you do is as you work through the poem, the first stanza doesn't have the letter R. The second stanza has the letter R, but doesn't have the letter O. and so on and so forth, all the way through, right? And so the other catch is that you have to use every other letter in the alphabet before you can end the stanza. These poems get very long. This one's not that long because it forces you to change your vocabulary because you can't use the words you normally use. So you'll see really funny ways of saying the word name when I get to the E one. Can't say name. Anyway, here we go. You ready? This is called Robert, a lipogram apology. Did he leave? I bet he left. Okay. JK, he's still here. Okay. While living in Milledgeville, GA, seeking a diploma once again, the woman who taught my advanced class, consisting mainly of weekly sessions one-on-one to discuss up to 6 poems in development, with a few whole class meetings, enjoying poems penned by famous poets. See how I can't say poetry? Yeah, you see it. All right. She told me to avoid naming anyone, especially those accused of violence. I quickly changed the opening line, used to feedback like this, unfazed by the cautious implication, a potential lawsuit. I start here because since that critique, I never name my attackers, never name partners, family members, even friends. What a waste. Every character in my verse exists as a link, a faded line running between them and the speaker. Yesterday, I resisted the urge, just barely switched the perspective, zapped the specific, made it vague. I know in music, saying people's names isn't discouraged. Hey there, Delilah. Roxanne. Alejandro. And poetry equals music in certain circles. I know every song you've written in my honor features a clue, a secret wink at the amazing love we share. But still, as months stack up for us, I stop my hand from forming that jovial graffiti of your honorific. With 60 or 1,000 stanzas, all quaking in acclaim for you, for us, for intimacy. It's a shock I say my beloved's name not even once. I wish this hesitance, issued initially as legal advice, but habituated now as a law, unintended, was about justice. But factually, it's about anxiety. My qualms about some anonymous someone knowing you in the dozens of ways I claim to, how you have always insisted this connection belonged to no one but us, was nobody else's business. I know you're unsurprised by a poem focused on you. More lines promising forever good sex and inside jokes. And even so, here I am, inking a lipogram, a form poem keeping me away from saying your name, from designing my cursive as proof I'm unafraid of consequences possibly arriving if heaven learns I love you and you love me. Like a precise shape carved in a sapling's bark, RB plus MP, nearly a full spelling, so close. I know a poem, one expressly broken before beginning, is no proxy for naming such a world, for simply offering gospel. And I'm sorry, I can provide no more. Only here, dawn soon enough, lazy kisses, good morning, coffee programmed already, a made bed, a clean shower, laundry folded, fingers pressed on scalp running clockwise, whispers from arousal and never ceasing even in slumber. I love you, I love you, I love you, your name here. So another thing that I'm excited about, right, is about like pleasure. And one of the fun things about pleasure is sex. So this is a sex poem. And it's a poem I wrote during National Poetry Month this year in response to a prompt. You had to use like 3 words, and I think the words were like 10, galaxy, and something else. And then you had to start the poem with the line, "Don't ask why." So here's the poem. It's called Kitchen. Don't ask why so many of my poems about our love take place in the kitchen, why I put a speaker in there, but not a plant. The answer is obvious, uninteresting. Linoleum is easier to clean. Yes, we cook together. You at the cutting board, multiplying servings, me at the sink, cleansing your tools to protect our future selves, sated, the rhythm of satisfaction pulsing between us, the itis pushing us out of the kitchen onto the couch. It's easier to clean the fallen food scraps, water from refilled ice trays, a jagged orgasm shuddered out of me while the rice simmers. Sometimes I read and you cook. Sometimes I cook and you whisper all the ways you dance with me into oblivion, our bodies on repeat as 10 galaxies pass us by. When I think of love, I imagine you sweeping the floor before you leave me, entering the back door all flourish and fabulous, late but exuberant, smile infectious, and all for me. When I think of love, I think of smuggling our desire for more from the kitchen to the bedroom, unleashing libido like a volcano, the comfort of cotton sheets superior to cold linoleum or leather-backed chairs. When I think of love, I think of my tea already made, breakfast on the stove, your tarot cards divining across the dining table, a good morning singing across your lips, meaning I love you, meaning we made it, meaning I've suspended our grief long enough for this meal. Yes, I construct a kitchen when I think of love, creator reimagined as cook, as lover, as lifetime. Thank you.
That was amazing. Oh my God. Oh my God. Okay, so do you want to do Q&A? Yeah. Okay, so we can do Q&A, but remember that we're gonna come up to the microphone, just up the little stairs if you want to. I guess we could just repeat them since the stairs are here. We don't want to trip. Okay. No. Okay. All right. We will, I promise, Zoom, I promise I will repeat it very clearly, the questions, okay? And you throw yours into the chat, which I have open. Let's see. Who else is hungry, says Leslie. Oh, that's from earlier. I think that's from earlier. Thanks, Leslie. Okay. Monica and I are here to answer your questions. Does anybody have any? Really? Okay. You don't have to. Okay. Mia has a question. Yep. So Mia's asking me if the work that I read tonight is part of the book that has it already been published or is it coming out? The first piece and the third piece are coming out in my memoir and essays that Clash Books is publishing in 2022. The middle long piece is still as a draft, so I don't have, just, you know, keep your fingers crossed for me, okay? I'm working on it, thank you. Okay, here's one for you. Anna is asking you, this is definitely you, when is the next erotic workshop, writing workshop, not erotic workshop? That's a different thing. When is the next erotic writing workshop happening, Monica?
That's a great question. So this erotic workshop is actually host them out of so hopefully in the fall or next spring. Yes, that's the answer. I haven't figured it out yet. We're working.
We're gonna hold you to that,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Arista.
That was about the same thing that you used to in your employment. I was wondering what it's like to sort of talk about the same thing in different forms.
This is a good question. Okay, Arista is asking Monica. She's noting that there's an essay in the Rumpus that also talks about your uterus, right? And the question is, what is it like to approach the same subject through two different forms?
Yep. Oh yeah, now I remember. You're talking about the Artemis piece.
Oh yes.
Yes. Sorry. Okay, so I have this essay called "Grief is an Excuse," and it talks about wanting to go through not having children because of the vicarious grief associated with the murder of Black children, and how I do not think I will survive it if it happens to me. And so that's the most direct thing that I've written about that particular subject. I think it's really difficult to transcend genres when you're talking about the same thing, but I also remind myself that, like, I mean, whatever, this is what I want to talk about. So I'm going to keep talking about it until I don't want to talk about it anymore. Utilizing different genres for that allows me to say things that I wouldn't say in poetry. Because, right, the poem, where is it? Oh, whichever the uterus depression poems I read tonight, talks about a miscarriage, but doesn't say the word miscarriage. It doesn't say loss. It doesn't say any of those words. But the benefit of the essay is that I feel like I can name something more directly without feeling required as a poet to not even mask it, but just kind of make it prettier than it is. I don't know why that's my instinct, because I'm like, yeah, this is prose. Tell him it's a miscarriage. And it's like, I don't know what that reaction is. But in poetry, I'm more interested in not saying the word directly. Because also in both of those poems, I never say the word cramps, which is what they're about. Because the uterus gets upset, so she cramps on you. And that was something that was really important to me, was not saying, I don't want to say the word in poetry. I want to get at the deeper thing. But in an essay, I feel like I can name it more directly. So that would be, yes. All right, yeah, let's go. Yeah.
I see that Mary has a question about our work and where we can find that. But since Lisa in the chat is asking something that connects to what we were talking about. So Lisa's asking, we'll get right back to you, to Mary. This might sound like a dumb question. It doesn't. But how does one flip between genres? I have the worst time trying and it's overwhelming. I just want to say what you just said. It's the same thing. I feel the same, almost the same relationship between poetry and prose in terms of subject matter approach. When I want to really dig into something, when I'm trying to learn something about myself, I'm almost always writing prose. I need the large space of the page and the paragraph to kind of, unspool something. But in poetry, I won't say it's more crafted, but it's a different building process.
This is like a different part of your brain.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is. That's not helpful. It's the hippocampus. It's the hippocampus.
Thank you. Karen reminds us of the hippocampus. That's what it is. Yeah, although I also have, Lisa, I also have, like Monica, I also have poems that deal with the same thing as, in essays. And sometimes I steal from my own work, which I think is bad. I don't think we're supposed to do it, but
yes, same. That's it, same.
Mary wanted to know where you can buy our work. My prose books are not published yet, but my poetry is available. Please go through White Whale Books in Pittsburgh.
Always.
They can always get whatever you need and ship it.
Yes. You can go to my website on monicaprince.com.
Queen of Excellence. I feel like I need something like that on my website now. Other questions from the crowd in front of us? Matthew Vargo. Question to both, okay. Oh, so the question, Matthew's Matthew's question is, what is the experience of reading in front of your partner? And since I started my reading telling you a story about reading in front of my partner and how that went, I'll let Monica answer this one.
So what's funny, so my partner's also a creative, so like he's kind of used to this, if that makes sense. Also, I read him everything I write. I'm not a, there are some poet and creative relationships where like they don't do that. Like they're just like, no, I'm in competition with you. And I'm like, no, we're not. Also, my Corey poems is why he fell in love with me in the first place. So I just read everything in front of him. We're super gushy and gross about our love. But I read everything in front of him always, like first drafts. Like I just finished this poem. You want to listen? Okay, here it goes. So he's just used to it. He's just used to me doing it all the time, I guess. And plus, he's doubly used to it because strangers in our small town will read my stuff and then approach him and be like, Monica talked about you so beautifully. And it was amazing. And it's just like so funny. So you just have to get used to it. This is the problem when you date an extrovert and a successful extrovert. Is that like people are just going to always talk to you about who you are. And this is like, if I wrote fiction, this probably wouldn't happen. But alas.
So let me jump in. Let me jump back in because since you're talking about extroversion, I'm just checking in to see that my introvert is still here. I am married to an introvert. And that story I told you at the beginning taught me something really important that helped us. We've been married now for 17 years, right, Paul? I think he's not going to say anything. We've been married for 17, together for 19, I think. But I learned something really important. That was the very beginning of my being a prose writer. So I was really used to living behind the kind of veil of poetry. You could, with a plausible deniability thing, but it didn't even occur to me. I'm less of an extrovert now than I was then, but it didn't even occur to me to let my partner read that piece. And I went headlong into this thing that I thought was going to be received as kind of an expression of love, which is what it was meant to be. But instead, I think he felt exposed. And so we've had to kind of negotiate that over the years, and I think successfully. And now I will talk with him if there's something that I'm writing that is potentially, exposing or something like that. I mean, there really isn't much anymore. And he knows all about my life. My memoir is about my life before him, mostly. He is not the bad husband.
Reminds me also that I don't read things that because, people have conflict. I don't read those poems in public. Period, actually. So that's also another, it's not a rule between us, it's just a decision I decided to make, that I don't read the poems that I'm just like, he said this. So I don't read those poems. I'm sure he would also be okay with this, but I don't read those poems either. That's just because I don't know, love poems are higher. Nobody's business.
Any last questions? Yes. Thanks. This is Monica's partner, whose name we don't have a name for him. Go ahead. My name here. Good question. So the question is noting that we both use music. Yes. Oh, yeah. In our work, and what is what? Okay, I lost it. How does music play into our process and the product? Okay. Do you want to go first? No. All right, I'll go first. Music is the thing that takes me back in memory. It's the thing that I ground myself by. I mean, a lot of my memoir has music in it, musical touchstones. So it's the thing that, like they say that smell is the yeah, the strongest, but for me, it's not. Music is. So, and I really am a fan of kind of having a conversation with the song inside my work, like finding the theme in the song and then amplifying it and echoing it inside the work. So that's fun. I think it's a way to make, it's also a way of creating setting, right? Because I'm writing about the 90s mostly for this particular project. So I want to make sure that you feel immersed in that time and place.
So I don't listen to music when I'm writing. It's distracting to me. I will start just writing the lyrics down, so I don't use music when I'm writing. However, it shows up in my work in a way of, I typically use it as an image more than anything else. And also as a reference point if I need to explain something. I think. I don't even have an answer to that. Standing back here, I don't know.
Well, I'll say one more thing about music, and it's that my memoir and essays that Clash is going to put out, when they wrote to me to tell me that they wanted to publish the book, they said that they loved the themes. The themes of food and music were what drew them in, but my publisher said, we might have a little problem with all the lyrics that you're using in here, though. Copyright. And I said, I wondered about that. And I did wonder about that. And I, in the writing of essays, and I thought I could worry about this, or I could just write the piece and worry about it later. So we're at the worrying about it later part. And I don't know what's going to happen. I can tell you a little story though about someone Julia and I both know who wrote a book of poetry that used a lot of Kanye West's lyrics. And yeah, Sarah's book. And Wesleyan University Press put it out. And when she was going through the process of publishing it, the legal team came down and said, no, they said, absolutely, you cannot use this, these lyrics. So she ended up rather creatively using blackout, so that it's blacked out in various places. And of course she had to rewrite certain things, but she talks a lot, it's interesting, she talks a lot about what that was like to navigate. And now I guess I have to do the same. I don't want to. I don't have to do blackout. We'll figure it out. I'm not worried. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you all so much. Thank you, Zoom. Mwah. Thank you, guys. Hey, and one more shout out to Jimmy Zawada on his birthday. Happy birthday, Jimmy. Have a good time tonight. All right. Okay, Zoom folks and Paul. I love you, Paul. Bye.